The letter that changed everything. Enola Holmes. Chapter 1. There are two types of letters in this world. The kind you expect, and the kind that unravels your life. It arrived in the second post, the ink on its cream envelope just slightly smudged as if caught in the rain. I found it waiting by the oil lamp on the side table of the boarding house parlour, sandwiched between a society notice from Mrs. Treadley's Committee for Moral Decency and a half-crushed bill for horse feed, neither of which, I need hardly say, were addressed to me. But this one was. Miss Enola E. Holmes, the Wisteria Boarding House, Bloomsbury, London. No return address, no seal. Just my full name, in a hand so precise it might have been drawn with a ruler. That alone gave me pause. Very few people knew my full name, and none would use it unless they were either dangerous, dull, or dead. I turned it over. The flap was already loosened. It had been opened and resealed. A warning bell tolled somewhere behind my ribs. "Something wrong, dear?" called Miss Finch from her high-backed chair by the fire, where she was pretending not to read the London Journal upside down. "Nothing but the usual," I lied with a smile. "Blackmail and overdue fees." She chuckled faintly. I slipped the letter into the folds of my coat, excused myself with a perfectly fabricated stomachache, and fled to my room. Once the bolt was drawn and the curtain shut, I sat on the edge of the iron bed frame, hands ungloving themselves. I opened it. The letter inside was folded twice, on thick parchment. No signature, no greeting, just 3 lines. "You are not safe. They lied about your mother. If you want the truth, come alone to Blackbridge Station 4:19, Thursday." I read it 3 times. Then I set it on fire. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. My mother, as the records claim, died 6 years ago in a train accident outside of Derby. No body, no witnesses, just scorched timetables and the smell of burnt upholstery. It had never sat right with me. Mother was many things, difficult, brilliant, impossible, but never careless. If she had vanished, it was by choice. If she had died, she would have left something behind. I had hunted for both, and found neither, until now. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I turned the letter over in my mind like a locked puzzle box. Who had written it? Why now? What did they know? And most importantly, what did they want me to find? The next morning, I visited the General Post Office on St. Aldwych. I wore a dull grey hat with a too long veil and walked like someone less dangerous than I am. It works, more than it should. "I need the manifest from yesterday's second post," I told the clerk, in the clipped, confident voice of someone with power and very little patience. "I'm tracing a misdirected government envelope, immediate clearance from Mr. Howard of the Ministry of Interception." It's remarkable how effective nonsense can be when said with conviction. 10 minutes later, I had what I needed. And there it was, a letter meant for a Miss Eliza Hemlock, who, according to the GPO ledger, lived at number 22, Wisteria House. Not me. I lived at number 12. Back in my room, I stared at the fireplace, trying to think like someone who didn't want me thinking. Eliza Hemlock, it couldn't be coincidence. That name, Hemlock, wasn't common. And something about it tugged at a memory I couldn't quite catch. But why had the letter come to me? I looked again at the envelope. The 2 in 22 had been smudged, the ink feathering into the parchment as if corrected hastily. Someone had redirected it. Intentionally. Thursday came with fog so thick it swallowed the sound of hooves. The lamps outside were faint halos in the gloom, and Blackbridge Station sat like a forgotten mausoleum on the edge of the riverbank. I arrived at 4:10. Alone. Or so I believed. I kept to the shadows behind the iron columns, my skirts hiked enough to move swiftly if I had to. I carried nothing but a folded knife in my corset and a photograph of my mother at age 21. I'm not sure why I brought it. Some foolish hope that she might be there, in the mist, whole and smiling. I was not met by my mother, but I was not alone. At exactly 4:19, a figure emerged from the shadows beneath the railway bridge. Not a man, not a boy, a woman. She was tall and stooped slightly, as though from years of watching the ground. Her hat was too large, her gloves mismatched, and when she spoke, it was in a voice hoarse from disuse. "You're early," she rasped. "And you're not Eliza Hemlock," I replied, hand tightening on the knife handle. She stepped closer. Her eyes flicked over me, not threateningly, but with the sharpness of someone assessing a chessboard, not an opponent. "No," she said, "but I know who is. And if you want to live, you'll stop looking for her." She handed me something, a scrap of ribbon, blood-stained. Then she vanished into the fog before I could speak. Back in my room, I unfolded the ribbon beneath the lamplight. Sewn into the hem in tiny white stitches were 3 letters, E-E-H. And on the corner, faded by time and perhaps tears, was the unmistakable scent of my mother's perfume. I should have been terrified, but instead, I whispered to the empty room, "Eliza Hemlock, who are you?" The wind rattled the window pane. Then, a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, 3 taps. Not Miss Finch. She always forgets to knock. I rose from the chair with a pulse like thunder in my ears, and opened the door. What I saw froze the breath in my throat. A small envelope, pinned to the door with a single sewing needle, and written on it, in that same strange hand, "You weren't supposed to get the letter, but now you must finish what she started." Chapter 2. The needle had pierced clean through the wood of the door. A deliberate gesture, cold, personal, and yet silent. I didn't touch the envelope for a full minute. The hallway outside my door was empty. No footsteps. No laughter from Miss Finch's parlour. Only the creak of a pipe and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock 2 floors below. I closed the door behind me with a soft click, slid the needle out and held the envelope to the lamplight. Same cream paper, same controlled hand. You weren't supposed to get the letter, but now you must finish what she started. No name, no instructions. Just that. And yet, somehow, I knew exactly who she was. My hand shook as I reached into the fire grate and pulled out what was left of the original letter, just black flakes. Gone. Stupid. A mistake made in panic. I tucked the new envelope into the pocket sewn into the lining of my skirt and retrieved the ribbon again. The initials E.H. were nearly invisible now, having darkened with blood. But it wasn't the ribbon that struck me as strange this time. It was the stitchwork. Tiny, perfect cross-stitches. I'd seen this exact embroidery style before, only once, when I was 7. My mother had shown me how to hide a cipher in a hemline. I whispered aloud, "She stitched this herself." It wasn't a ribbon. It was a message. The next morning, I walked 2 miles through a grey London drizzle to the only person I trusted with needlework secrets and who would be too insulted to betray me. Mrs. Dervish ran a tailor's shop off Camden Row that hadn't changed since Queen Victoria still bothered to smile. She smelled permanently of damp wool and peppermint and had a tongue that could peel paint. "I haven't got time for you, girl," she barked as I entered, though her eyes immediately narrowed. "What's that look on your face? You're about to ruin something." "Good morning to you too," I replied, shaking out my umbrella. "I need your eyes. Flattery won't help you, Miss Holmes. What have you broken?" I handed her the ribbon. She didn't speak for a long moment, then reached for a magnifier without being asked. Her fingers, gnarled by 40 years of fine stitchwork, moved delicately over the bloodied edge. "These weren't made for decoration," she murmured. "This is meant to be read. It's a substitution pattern. Classic smuggler's method, southern coast. Old trick. First stitch of each thread group marks a letter. Simple. Clever." She paused. Her eyes flicked to mine. "Where'd you get this?" "Someone left it for me." She snorted. "Someone with a talent for danger." She lifted a pair of shears and clipped the edge carefully. Her voice dropped to a whisper, like we were in a church. "It says, Find Eliza before they do. Eliza Hemlock. There was that name again, a name that did not exist, at least not publicly. I thanked Mrs. Dervish, lied about needing the ribbon for a school play, and walked until the streets grew darker and the fog heavier. My boots echoed off the slick stones of a back alley near Clerkenwell. There, nestled between a pawn shop and a closed-down chemist, was Chimes and Koser Public Records Office, a name no one ever remembered unless they needed to forget something. Inside, it smelled of old ink and coal ash. The man behind the desk was blind in one eye and watched me with the other like I owed him a debt. I slipped him a coin. Births, deaths and disappearances, I said. Looking for a girl named Eliza Hemlock, London-born. Possibly 15 to 20 years of age. He gave me a look that translated to good luck with that, but fetched a rusted tin box all the same. It took me 2 hours and a growing pile of dust-covered ledgers to find it. Not a birth certificate, not a census listing, not even a school record, but a death notice. Name, Eliza H. Status, presumed deceased, cause, fall from train, Derby line, date, same day as my mother's disappearance. My stomach turned. Either it was coincidence or someone had covered their tracks using someone else's name, a ghost identity. But then something caught my eye. The form had a signature at the bottom. Witness to the scene of death. Eudora E. Holmes, my mother. She had signed the death report. I staggered out into the street like someone had struck me. The sky had darkened. Rain pelted the brim of my hat, but I hardly noticed. Why would my mother sign the death record of a girl who doesn't exist? Unless she hadn't died that day. Eliza had. And my mother had faked her own death by switching places, which meant my mother might still be alive, and whoever sent me that letter didn't want me to find out. By the time I returned to Wisteria House, my skirt hem was soaked through and my gloves smelled of wet leather. I didn't bother going up to my room. I went straight to the basement. The landlord never used it. The girls at the boarding house were told it was for coal only, but I had made it my own months ago, my thinking place. I lit a lamp and unfolded the ribbon again. Beneath the visible message, the thread had come loose, just slightly, near the corner. I tugged. Inside the seam was a tiny square of folded paper. I unfolded it. It was a map, drawn hastily in pencil, water-stained, but legible. A route through the underground tunnels beneath Blackbridge Station. One turn marked with a red X, and one word, listening. The silence of the basement pressed around me, heavy and watchful. Then, from the grate above, I heard it. Scrape. Pause. Scrape again. Someone was on the floor above me. No creaking floorboards, just careful, deliberate movement. They were searching my room, my real room. I held my breath and didn't move. They didn't call my name, they didn't knock. They were looking for something, and they were quiet. Too quiet for a thief, too quiet for a friend. I didn't go back up until nearly dawn, and when I did, my door was ajar. Inside nothing had been taken. Not visibly, but my pillow had been moved, my rug, straightened too perfectly. And one drawer, my old keepsake drawer, was now locked. I had never locked it before, and I didn't have the key. Chapter 3. I stared at the drawer like it might hiss at me. My hands itched to pry it open, but I didn't. Not yet. Because here's what mattered. I had never locked it. I didn't even know it could be locked. Someone had tampered with it. Which meant one of two things. They wanted something from inside it, or they had already taken something and locked it behind them to see if I'd notice. And oh, I noticed. The drawer had once held a collection of odds and ends, an old music box with a cracked ballerina, 2 letters from my brother Mycroft, unopened naturally, and a black and white photo of my mother in front of a hay cart taken when she was 20. The last item was the only thing of value, not for its worth, but for what it represented. If someone had taken that. I pulled open the top drawers, checking for damage. None. The rest of the room appeared untouched, except the oil lamp was nearly empty, though I had refilled it 2 nights ago, and the wick had been turned low, as if someone had used it for a long while without drawing attention. They'd spent time in here, quietly, deliberately, watching, reading, learning me. I sat on the bed with my fists clenched, breath held just beneath the surface like a diver. Then I stood, and I left. The Wisteria boarding house had an old coal cellar out back, abandoned now, locked by rust. I had picked the lock months ago just to see if I could. It was the perfect place for secrets. I brought the ribbon map, the envelope, the sewing needle, and a notebook. I left everything else behind, including the map copy I'd started drawing. Let them take the bait. I had a new plan forming. It took all of Sunday morning to locate the tunnel entrance from the hand-drawn map. Blackbridge Station was mostly closed now, its underground platforms forgotten by time and rail progress. I found the entrance behind an iron maintenance hatch covered by ivy and gilt. It took effort to push it open, the hinges shrieking like a wounded animal, but once inside, the air grew still and damp. The brick-lined tunnel sloped gently downward, lit only by the flickering match in my hand. I lit a second before the first died, then a third, then a fourth. The map was surprisingly accurate. 5 paces past the water main, 7 past the broken ladder, then left. And there it was, a sealed wooden door, painted over twice, and beside it, a carved word barely visible beneath grime and moss, listening, just like the note. No handle, no keyhole, only a sliding panel at ear height. I hesitated, then slid it open. At first, nothing. Then, air moved. A breath. A voice behind the wall, quiet as parchment scraping stone. She's not ready yet. Another voice, firmer. Then she'd better be. You saw the name on the letter. Then silence. Footsteps retreating. I stayed, there for what felt like a full minute before sliding the panel shut again. Someone was behind that door. Someone who knew me, or knew of me. And they were waiting for me to be ready. I returned to my room before dusk, heart thudding like hooves on cobblestone. The sky outside had turned to slate, and the fog had settled like a warning. The drawer was still locked. Good. I reached into the back of my wardrobe and pulled out the little brass lockpick set I'd stolen from a drunk stage magician 6 months ago. 1 minute, 2. Click. The lock opened with an almost reluctant sigh. The music box was gone. The photo too. In their place was something I had not put there. A silver key. No tag. No chain. Just a long, narrow shaft with an intricate square bow. I stared at it, then sat very, very still, because I knew that key. Not from possession, but from memory. My mother had carried exactly such a key on a velvet ribbon around her neck. I had once asked what it opened. She had smiled, kissed my forehead and said, "It opens the place no one should ever find unless it's life or death." I was 9, and now at 16, I was holding it in my palm, cold and real and unmistakable. Life or death? Was that what this was? A knock broke my thoughts. Not a sharp one, a gentle tap. 2, then a pause, then one more. Miss Finch's pattern. I shoved the key under my pillow and opened the door. She stood there with her hands folded over her apron, looking unusually nervous. "There's a visitor for you in the drawing room," she said, eyes flicking over my shoulder. "A gentleman says he's your cousin." "I don't have cousins." "That's what I thought, dear. But he's very polite and very, well, insistent." "What's his name?" "Says it's Mr. Ashcroft." I blinked. That name? My mother used to write it on letters, not as a recipient, as a code word. Ashcroft meant watcher, one of her informants, or spies, or something between both. I took a slow breath. "Tell him I'll be down in a moment." The drawing room smelled of stale perfume and too many secrets. The fire had been lit, but the man standing before it had the coldness of someone who hadn't felt warmth in years. He wore a grey coat with faint mud at the hem. His hat was perched neatly on the side table, and his walking cane, too thin to support actual weight, rested against the hearth like a warning. He turned slowly as I entered. Late 30s, perhaps, clean-shaven, sharp eyes behind round spectacles, and a smile that never touched them. "Miss Holmes," he said with a bow, "forgive the intrusion. I had to see you in person. Strange, since you claim to be my cousin." A small chuckle. "I was hoping for wit. You didn't disappoint." "Why are you here?" He stepped forward. "To warn you. You've already drawn too much attention. You were never supposed to receive the letter, and you're certainly not meant to keep digging." I stepped closer, masking my nerves with practiced defiance. "And yet, here I am." His eyes flicked to my hand, where I'd forgotten I still clutched the envelope from the drawer. Too late. He reached into his coat. I reached into mine. He stopped, raised both hands. "No threats, not today, but I will leave you with this." He leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. "If you use that key, someone will die." And with that, he picked up his hat, nodded once, and left. I stood in the middle of the room long after he'd gone, alone again except for the silver key in my pocket, and the questions burning hotter than ever. Who was Eliza Hemlock? Why had my mother vanished in her place? And now, most terrifying of all, what could that key possibly unlock that was worth a death? Chapter 4. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the bed covers in full clothing, the silver key clutched in my hand like a relic of the dead. Outside, the fog had returned with a vengeance, slithering against the window panes like smoke looking for a crack, and inside my mind, Mr. Ashcroft's words kept circling. "If you use that key, someone will die. Not you will die. Someone." Which meant I wasn't the target. Someone else was, but who? By morning, a decision had formed, not one born of fear, but of necessity. I needed to find what the key opened. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. I began with the only object that had ever been linked to the key before, the photograph of my mother, the one that had gone missing from my drawer. Fortunately, I still had the original plate negative from when I made a personal copy years ago. Most girls my age kept lockets of sweethearts or newspaper clippings of handsome actors. I kept secrets. The negative was hidden inside the spine of a hollow book titled Botany for Ladies, untouched on my shelf. I held it to the window and let the pale morning light filter through. There was my mother standing beside a hay cart, hair pinned in the odd swoop she always wore in private. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at the background, the barn. A small plaque above the doors. I'd never noticed it before, but the negative revealed it faintly. Ashgrove Institute for Exceptional Girls. Not Ashcroft. Ashgrove. Close enough to be a coincidence. Far enough to be deliberate. I dressed in a riding skirt and coat, pinned up my hair, and forged a letter of endorsement from a Lady Thistlewhite who did not exist. It wouldn't fool anyone intelligent, but that was never the point. People believe what fits their assumptions. I took the early coach to Surrey. The Ashgrove Institute sat at the end of a long dirt lane, flanked by hawthorn trees that bent like eavesdroppers. The building itself was lovely, 3 floors of ivy-covered stone and tall windows with lace curtains. It looked like it taught French, embroidery, and how to pour tea. It felt like it taught silence. The woman who answered the door was not what I expected, mid-50s, pale blue dress, neatly tied brooch. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Headmistress Ingram. You're here on behalf of Lady Thistlewhite?" I gave a polite nod. "To evaluate prospective enrolment for her niece." A flicker of hesitation. Then she stepped aside. "Of course. We rarely receive recommendations from so far up the ladder. Come in." She led me through corridors that smelled faintly of lemon oil and damp stone. Girls in grey uniforms passed silently, Eyes down, mouths shut. Not one whispered. Too quiet for a school. Too obedient for children. As we walked, I stole glances at the walls, portraits of girls in neat rows, most of them looking just off the camera, as if waiting for something. At the end of the hallway was a locked iron door. Headmistress Ingram caught me looking. "Staff archives," she said shortly. "Private." She guided me to a drawing room. Tea was poured. Questions asked. Answers given. She seemed to relax. That was her first mistake. "I saw a photo," I said casually as I sipped. "One of your older students. My lady friend's niece is quite taken by the idea of legacy. The girl had dark hair, narrow face, a ribbon around her collar. I believe her name was Eliza Hemlock." The silence stretched taut as violin string. Headmistress Ingram blinked slowly. "Just once." "Eliza Hemlock was never a student here." I smiled faintly. "Are you sure? This would have been perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. I remember every girl that comes through these doors, Miss Holmes." She hadn't asked for my name. Another mistake. "She had the kind of presence that's hard to forget," I added. "Sharp eyes, clever mouth, made people uneasy. Then she certainly didn't belong here." I set my cup down carefully. "No, I suppose she didn't." Her fingers twitched on her own cup. "If there's nothing further." "One more thing," I said. I took out the silver key. Her breath caught. It was the smallest change, barely audible, but it was enough. Her voice when it returned was brittle. "That's not yours." "Then whose is it?" She rose from her seat. "I think we're done here." So did I. Back in the corridor, I noticed something odd. A girl stood at the end of the hall facing the wall, not doing anything, not fidgeting, just standing. She turned her head slightly as I passed. Her eyes flicked to mine, one blink. Then she mouthed something, slow and distinct. "Don't trust her." I didn't look back. I returned to the carriage stop with the weight of suspicion riding alongside me. If Eliza Hemlock had never been enrolled, why was my mother photographed in front of the institute? And why did the headmistress recognize the key? Unless Eliza was never a student, she was something else. A teacher? A visitor? A patient? No, not a patient. A prisoner. My mother had always said, "The best cages wear silk curtains." I was starting to see what she meant. Back in London, I returned to the hidden coal cellar where I'd stashed my items. I laid out the ribbon, the envelope, the copied map, the cipher notes, and now the key. Then I did something I had avoided doing for 3 days. I took out the folded photograph of my mother, not the copy, the original, because now I realized something had been bothering me about it from the start. Not the barn, not the expression, the back. I turned it over. Scrawled in quick dark pencil was a line I had never noticed before. "If this finds you, go to the listening room. Do not trust Ashcroft. Use the key at the hour when no one listens." I stared. The hour when no one listens. Night? A specific time? Then I thought of the tunnels, of the voice I had heard behind the panel. They had been speaking at precisely 4:19, the time listed on the first letter. Not random, a signal. That's when they speak, which means that's when I unlocked the door. But there was one last piece of the puzzle missing. I had the key. I had the door. I had the hour. But I still didn't know what was on the other side. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to. Chapter 5. It was nearly 4 when I reached the tunnels beneath Blackbridge Station. The city above was asleep or pretending to be. The only sounds were the drip of water off stone and the shiver of wind dragging across broken tiles. Even the rats were quieter here. I had come alone, of course. No notes to Mycroft, no final instructions left in drawers, because if I failed to return, there would be no one else to follow the trail, and if I did return, it would mean I had found something worth dying for. I ran my hand along the brick wall as I walked, steadying myself. 5 paces past the water main, 7 past the ladder. Then left. There it was. The wooden door with the word half-carved, half-rotted above it, listening. I drew the silver key from the hidden lining of my glove. It felt heavier than before, or maybe I was just beginning to understand the weight it truly carried. I knelt, searching the frame. There, near the base of the panel, a hidden keyhole, smaller than my thumb. I slid the key in. It turned once, then clicked. The door creaked open 1/2 inch. I waited. Nothing. No voices. No sound. Not yet. It was 4:17. I slipped inside. The air was different on the other side, stale, thick, like parchment burned too long in a closed room. The corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders and lit by a faint orange glow coming from a single oil lamp mounted ahead. As I walked, the walls changed from stone to metal, old ventilation ducts, latticed steel panels, bolted seams, and ahead, a large circular room, the listening room. That's what it had to be. It was round and domed like an old observatory, except no stars were ever meant to be seen here. Along the inner curve were 5 tall wooden chairs, empty. The walls were lined with thin black wires, strung like spider webs from one side to the other, each terminating in small brass listening cones. At the centre stood a table, and on that table, photographs, files, drawings. I approached slowly and felt my pulse catch. The first photograph was of me. Not just any photograph, one from 2 years ago in Whitechapel, when I had slipped out of a boarding school window to investigate a missing apothecary's wife. I remembered the night. I remembered the lamplight. This image had been taken without my knowledge. Beneath it, a stamped file. Subject 7E, Holmes Enola, observation level, red authorization, black ink redacted. I flipped through the file with increasingly numb fingers, dates, movements, known associates, sketches of ciphered letters I'd intercepted. Even one of my disguises, documented in full. They'd been watching me for years, not just recently. Not since the letter. Before. A creak echoed behind me. I turned sharply. A girl stood in the arched entrance, her silhouette backlit by the hallway's dull glow. Slim, pale grey uniform, hair tied too neatly, and her eyes sharp, knowing, frightened. We stared at each other. Then she whispered, "Are you Enola Holmes?" I didn't answer immediately. I was still measuring the way her right hand trembled against the wall. Not fear. Pain. "Who are you?" I asked. She took 2 steps forward. "Eliza Hemlock," she said. My knees nearly buckled. "Eliza Hemlock died," I managed. She shook her head. They let everyone think that, including me for a time. Her voice was flat but strained, like someone who'd repeated too many lies to herself and only recently realized they no longer fit. "They faked the report. Your mother filed it because it was the only way to get me out. I was the distraction. She disappeared during the investigation while everyone looked for me instead." I tried to speak, but couldn't find the air. Eliza stepped closer and reached for the photograph still in my hands. "She knew they'd come after you one day. That's why she left the trail, the ribbon, the key. She wanted you to finish what she started." "And what was that?" She looked me in the eye. "To bring them down." Before I could respond, a sound cut through the room, a metallic scrape, followed by a sharp snap. We both turned. From one of the listening cones, a voice filtered in. Male, measured, cruel. "She's activated the room. Prepare containment." Eliza's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. "They found you." I backed toward the wall, brain racing. Who are they? But Eliza had already crossed to the far end of the chamber, pulling aside a loose grate. "Come with me now," she said, voice shaking. or you'll never make it out. I hesitated. The files, the truth, the evidence, it was all here. I can't just leave this. You must. They burn the room after breach. Another voice came through the cone, colder now. Terminate all subjects. No recovery. That decided it. I grabbed the file on myself, stuffed it into my coat and ducked into the grate behind Eliza. We ran. The crawl space twisted and narrowed until it finally spat us out into a side alley behind Blackbridge, reeking of coal ash and wet brick. Eliza collapsed to her knees. I looked back. Smoke had already begun to billow from the grate. A clean burn. No evidence. No trace. Just as they'd planned. We sat in the alley in silence, the fog mingling with the smoke. Finally, I turned to her. "Why did you stay?" I asked. "All these years, why not run?" Eliza didn't look at me. Her voice was small. "I didn't remember who I was until last month." "What?" They erased parts of me. Names, memories, faces. I was part of their training, observation, control. But when your mother came, something broke. She gave me a name again. Then they took her and locked me back in. I stared. "You were in the institute." She nodded. "I'm not the only one." I closed my eyes and let the weight of the truth settle. My mother had traded herself to get Eliza out. She had known that uncovering the truth would take longer than one generation, and the people behind it, they weren't just watching. They were selecting, grooming, silencing. I turned to Eliza. How many girls? Her eyes were haunted. Dozens. Maybe more? I stood slowly, then reached down and helped her to her feet. Then let's find them. Chapter 6. It's strange, isn't it, how quickly purpose replaces fear. A few hours ago, I was alone. Now I had a name, Eliza Hemlock, a survivor, a cipher in human form, and, more than that, a witness. We walked through the still-sleeping back streets of Bloomsbury like phantoms, each step drawing us further from the clean lie of ordinary life. The sky had begun to grey, but the mist clung stubbornly to every rooftop, swallowing lamplight and softening the outlines of things that should have been clear. The Institute hadn't just taken years from her, they had taken clarity. But memories don't stay buried. Not forever. And now? Now we were going to unearth them. Back at the Wisteria House coal cellar, I made us strong tea. Black, bitter, and a little burnt. It matched the mood. Eliza sat cross-legged on a folded blanket, her shoulders hunched, eyes flicking around the dim space like she was still expecting someone to drag her back underground. "You said there were others," I began. She nodded, slow and deliberate. "We were called the Ashgrove set. That's how they referred to us in the files. Girls between 12 and 17, smart, isolated, no families who would look too closely. I wrote every word down. Eliza, what did they want you for?" Her lips twitched, not quite a frown. "Some of us were tested for loyalty, others for memory control, language retention, code work. I was—" She paused, breathing carefully. "I was trained to follow orders. Unquestioningly. They built that into me. Over years. And my mother? She broke the pattern. She knew the system from the outside. When she came to Ashgrove pretending to be an evaluator, they let her in. She found me. And when she saw what had been done, she made a plan." "What kind of plan?" Eliza's eyes met mine. She left clues only her daughter could follow. I unrolled the copy of the listening room map and smoothed it flat. "There was a girl at the Institute," I said slowly. "She mouthed something to me. Don't trust her." Eliza looked up sharply. "Describe her." I did. She went very still. "That's Claire." "Friend?" Eliza shook her head. "More like half of one. We trained together. But the last time I saw her, she was different, blunted, like someone had rewritten the inside of her head." I exhaled slowly. "You think she's still under their control?" "I know she is." The more I listened, the more I saw it. A system designed not just to control information, but people. Built like a machine, recruit, rewire, release or erase. It wasn't just a secret society. It was a manufacturing plant for shadows. We needed proof, not guesses, not memories, names. At first light, I led Eliza to Chimes & Co.'s public records office, the same dusty den where I'd first seen her death notice. I knew where the cracks were now, and I planned to widen them. The man behind the desk, Mr. Chime, scowled at me like I owed him money. I offered a peppermint instead. It worked surprisingly well. I need restricted registry access, I said, under the Ashgrove Educational Trust. He scoffed. Don't have it, never did. Exactly, I said, and that's the problem. It used to exist. That got his attention. I leaned in. Check the 1885 educational funding ledger, then look at the attached list of students. I think you'll find 36 names that suddenly disappear around 1892. He grunted, but fetched the volume. Dust exploded as he opened it. I pointed. There they were. 36 names, organised by year, marked as Ashgrove Institute registrants. And then, nothing. No graduation dates, no transfers. Just blank space. See, I said softly. Erased, mid-education, unaccounted for. Mr. Chime closed the book with a quiet thud. You're chasing devils, miss? No, I said, straightening. I'm chasing the people who make them. Back in the coal cellar, Eliza studied the names. She recognised 4. 2 were dead. 1 had vanished in Germany. The last might still be in London. Name? I asked. She pointed. May Langford. She was 16 when they pulled her from the dormitories. Brilliant with pressure systems. They were training her for sabotage. And you think she's alive? She was clever enough to fake brokenness. They let her graduate early. We shared a look. There was only one way to find out. By evening, we stood in front of a rusted workshop on the East Docklands, Langford's Mechanical Repairs painted in fading letters on a wooden sign that hadn't been touched in years. The windows were boarded. The street was empty. I knocked once. No answer. Then again. Still nothing. Eliza touched my arm. Try the gate. Around the side, a metal gate rattled open under pressure. Inside, the shop was cold and still, but not abandoned. Tools hung with surgical precision. A kettle sat on a still-warm stove. And above the workbench, photographs. Eliza exhaled sharply. That's her. The woman in the image was older now, mid-20s, face streaked with oil, sleeves rolled to the elbow. She stood beside an engine half the size of a train boiler. Below the photo, a nameplate. May Langford, Director, Section 9. What's Section 9? I whispered. Eliza's face went pale. It's one of theirs, a sleeper unit, used for asset retrieval and witness suppression. I turned slowly. She didn't escape, I said. She joined them. Footsteps creaked overhead. A hatch opened in the ceiling. And there, in the flickering lamplight, a woman stood looking down at us. Older, sharper, familiar. May Langford. Well, she said, her voice like gravel wrapped in silk. I thought it might be you. She descended the stairs slowly, hands empty but confident. You shouldn't have come, she said. But now that you're here, perhaps we can talk. I stepped forward. Why join them? She laughed, low and bitter. Because it was safer than resisting. Because they needed someone like me to clean up when their pets misbehaved. Her eyes flicked to Eliza. She was one of mine once. Eliza stepped back. You trained us to forget ourselves. May nodded. And I can help you remember. But it'll cost. Cost what? I asked. She looked me dead in the eye. Your mother's last location. The room felt colder suddenly, as if the oil on the tools had turned to ice. You know where she is? I asked. I know where she was, May said, and what she was planning. But if I tell you, she held out her hand. I need something first. Eliza's voice cut in. Don't trust her. I'm not asking you to, May replied. I'm giving you a choice. I looked at her hand, at the face behind it, then at Eliza, and realized this was what the key had always meant. Not a door, not a lock. A choice. What would I give to know the truth? And who would I become if I took it? Chapter 7. May Langford's hand remained outstretched, as if the room hadn't frozen around it. Oil-streaked, ungloved, steady. It wasn't a hand that offered. It was a transaction. I don't make threats, she said softly. Only bargains. Eliza hadn't moved. Her eyes were locked on May's fingers, as if something from her buried past had clawed its way up and was now standing in front of her, smiling. You want to know where your mother went, May went on. What she died trying to uncover, then give me the file. What file? I asked carefully, though we both knew what she meant. The listening room records. The one you pulled before the fire. It's not just about you, Enola. It contains protocols, kill orders, operative codes, things that can dismantle their entire operation. Or, she added, with a tilt of her head, be used to build a better one. I stared at her. You think I'd hand that over to you? She gave a dry laugh. I think you haven't yet decided who the real enemy is, and I think you want to believe your mother's alive, enough to make you reckless. You worked for them. I still do, on paper, but no one ever told me I had to stay loyal, she narrowed her eyes. I'm offering you an alliance, not a leash. Why now? May leaned against the bench, wiping a smudge from a wrench. Because I'm tired of burning evidence, of cleaning up after frightened men who pretend they're saviors. I trained girls like Eliza because I had to. I'm giving you a chance to undo it. Eliza's voice cracked like flint. Don't believe her. She was the one who made us choose code names over real names, who made me forget my brother's face. May didn't flinch, and yet, here you are, alive, broken, branded with silence. My eyes flicked to the table behind May, scattered tools, a half-dismantled detonator, blueprints for something mechanical and cruel. The sort of thing built not to open doors, but to close them permanently. I said nothing. Just slowly pulled the file from my coat pocket. May's breath caught, not greedily, but like someone who had forgotten to hope. But instead of handing it to her, I stepped forward and tore a single page out. Insurance, I said, a pause. Then she nodded once, accepting the terms. Follow me. She led us through a narrow staircase concealed behind a shelf, winding into the underlevels of the building. The stonework changed from industrial to government issue, the kind you see in tunnels never meant to be found. 3 locked doors later, we reached a small underground room, and there, behind a reinforced glass wall, was a map. More precisely, a network, cities, routes, arrows. At the centre, circled in red ink, the garden. What is that? I asked. May replied without looking at me. Where your mother was last seen. Where? Scotland, Highlands, abandoned estate, coded in the files as Retreat 3. It's where they send operatives who've either seen too much or gone rogue. Prison? May nodded, but prettier, lush, controlled, isolated. Eliza moved to the glass, studying the web of names and arrows. There's another marker here, she said, pointing. West of Inverness. May looked, a beat of silence. That's not supposed to be there. I crossed to her side. What is it? Her voice was low, a name that shouldn't be active anymore. The tag was handwritten, Asset Echo. Eliza's breath hitched. That was my code name. But you're not the only one who used it, May said quietly. They duplicate identities, reuse them when one subject fails, if another echo is active. Then someone's impersonating me, Eliza whispered. Or worse. Could it be my mother? I asked. May shook her head. No. She was always classified as Harrow, never Echo. If another echo's active, that they're baiting someone, I turned toward Eliza. They're using your name to draw her in. We left the underground room without speaking. The sky had darkened again, and frost had begun to cling to the broken cobblestones outside. London had a way of folding in on itself when the truth got too heavy to carry in daylight. Inside the coal cellar, I unfolded the ripped page I had kept from the file. It wasn't just a dossier. It was a communication log. Encrypted correspondence between Harrow and E. I read it once, then again. My hands tightened. It wasn't just logistics or mission reports. It was affectionate, personal. Echo, you must not come for me. Not yet. You've done enough by surviving. I left the trail for Enola because she sees what others deny. But if you come, you'll disappear too. I love you as my own. H. Eliza sank to the floor. She wrote to me. I knelt beside her. She knew you'd find it. She believed you still existed beneath the programming. She stared at the page as if it might vanish, then looked up at me. What now? The answer was already forming, hard and inevitable. We go to the garden, I said. We find her. And we take down whatever's left of this system. May spoke behind us. There's no way in by land. The roads are monitored. Then we don't go by land. I turned the map. One side of the garden touched water, a long stretch of unguarded cliffside, too treacherous for carriages, but not for someone bold, clever, and a little desperate. Like us. Eliza gave a breathless laugh. You're serious. Deadly. May frowned. You'll need gear, warmth, and someone who knows how to move unseen. You volunteering? No, she said. I'm giving you someone better. She pulled open a drawer and removed a sealed envelope, red wax still intact. Inside was a card. Nicolette Bishop, operative grade B, disavowed. She owes me a life debt, May said. You tell her Langford sent you. She'll get you in. I raised an eyebrow. Trustworthy? No. Useful? A small smirk. Terrifying. That night, Eliza and I packed in silence. Matches, rope, coins, stolen coats, a small knife tucked into a boot, a locket that had once belonged to my mother. I wore it now, not as protection, but as a promise. As we doused the lamp, Eliza looked at me. Are you scared? I nodded. Terrified. A beat. But I'd rather be terrified with the truth than safe in a lie. And together, beneath the broken moonlight of a city built on secrets, we vanished into the fog. Chapter 8. The highlands breathed like a sleeping animal, low mist rising from mossy hollows, wind whistling through black pines like whispers through teeth. The journey north had taken us 3 days, most of it hidden. Freight trains, stolen carts, footpaths no longer on maps. We'd left London behind like a rotting fruit peel. Now, at the edge of the world, we stood on a cliffside overlooking what they called the garden. But gardens are meant to grow things. This one was built to erase them. It was not a building so much as an estate. Stone walls overgrown with creeping ivy, designed to look abandoned from above. No guards visible, no gates open, just quiet. Too quiet. A perfect illusion. This is it, Eliza murmured, pulling the scarf tighter around her neck. Her breath fogged in the cold, her voice low. I've dreamt of this place. I didn't know if it was real. It's real, I whispered, and it still breathes. We crouched behind a ridge of heather, our eyes scanning for any sign of motion. Nothing. Not a single torch or window light. Do you see the cliff access? I asked. Eliza pointed to the north end, where a sloping footpath curved down into the base of the estate, hidden behind layers of rock and root, barely more than a goat trail. That's where she would be waiting. Nicolette Bishop arrived at midnight. I only heard her because she wanted to be heard. She appeared from the trees with a curved blade at her belt, a crossbow slung over one shoulder, and the eyes of someone who'd bled for causes she didn't believe in. You're Langford's girl? She asked me, as if spitting nails. I'm nobody's girl. Her lips twitched. Approval, perhaps. You have the map? I handed her the folded copy. She glanced at it once, then crumpled it in her fist and tossed it into the fire. Won't need it. The layout's changed since the files were drawn. How do you know? Because I helped design the new one. Eliza stiffened beside me. I saw her fingers curl unconsciously, instinct flickering beneath the surface. Nicolette noticed, of course. She didn't comment. 2 miles in, she said, pointing to the tree line. There's an iron hatch behind the greenhouse ruins. That's our entry. It leads into the servants' tunnels. No one patrols them anymore. Too many blind corners. Too many memories. Memories. Nicolette looked at Eliza. You'll see. The journey down was slow and freezing. Loose stones slid beneath our feet, and the wind screamed through the valley like something mourning. We moved in silence, boots muffled by thick moss and years of neglect. At the edge of the greenhouse, we waited. No one came. Nicolette knelt at the rusted hatch, tapped a sequence into the UARM side panel, an old code, mechanical, still functioning. The door groaned open. Inside, dark, narrow stairs leading downward into black. We followed. The air changed instantly. Metal, dampness, and something older, disinfectant and despair. The tunnels were wider than expected, once used for servants and supply carts. We moved by lantern light, careful, alert. Nicolette led without hesitation. These walls used to talk, she said softly, but now they only echo. What happened here? I asked. She paused. They shut it down. Officially. Too many girls broke. Too many minds snapped. It wasn't subtle anymore. Eliza's voice was cold. You helped break them. Nicolette met her gaze. I did worse. That's why I'm here now. No one spoke after that. We reached the end of the tunnel around 3 a.m. A narrow grate opened into what must have once been the servants' dining room. Empty now, but clean. Clean in that too perfect way that made my skin crawl. No dust, no spiders. Just quiet. Nicolette held up a hand. From here we split. I'll create the distraction. You find the eastern corridor. There should be an archive room, wooden door, brass lock. If she's still here, that's where she'll be kept. Not in a cell? I asked. Worse, in a library. I blinked. Why? Because that's what they do with operatives who know too much. They don't punish them. They isolate them with ideas. They feed them just enough truth to convince themselves they chose it. Eliza shivered. I handed Nicolette one of the knives. You sure you'll be able to find us after? She smirked. If I don't, you'll hear me in the walls. Then she vanished into the gloom, like a shadow unhooked from its source. Eliza and I moved fast and low. The corridor was colder here, lined with paintings that had no faces, just outlines, as if someone had tried to scrub them clean and failed. A single lantern burned near a side door, casting the shadows of the iron bars across the walls like prison stripes. The wooden door was exactly where Nicolette said it would be. I knelt to inspect the brass lock. Mechanical, old, easy. I picked it in less than 10 seconds. The door creaked open, inside, floor-to-ceiling shelves, parchments, ledgers, scrolls, but no dust, and no sound. We stepped in. Eliza paused mid-stride, then whispered, "She's here." I turned. In the far corner sat a woman at a long desk, back straight, fingers steepled beneath her chin, hair streaked with grey now, thin, fragile, but her eyes, sharp as ever. My voice caught. "Mother?" Enola Holmes didn't smile, didn't cry. Just stood slowly, as if lifting weight she hadn't carried in years. "Eliza," she said, nodding once, and Enola. No questions, no surprise, just recognition. Eliza's breath hitched. You knew we'd come." Eudoria's voice was low, but unwavering. "I knew you had to." She stepped forward and touched my cheek, lightly, like remembering the shape of me. "I had to disappear, Enola. They would have taken you next. I thought you were dead. I needed them to think so too." I swallowed hard. "Then why now? Why let us find you?" Because the garden is rotting from the inside, and the rot spreads faster when you pull it into the light. She turned to Eliza. And because they've activated Echo, the real one. Eliza flinched. What do you mean, real? Eudora met her eyes. You were the prototype. She is the final product. And she's here, trained to replace you. Obedient. Perfect. And dangerous, I whispered. She was activated 2 days ago, Eudora said. And her mission is to eliminate any knowledge of the original Echo, including you, Eliza. And me. And me, I added softly. A sudden clang echoed from somewhere above. Nicolette's distraction. Too early. Too loud. Eudora's face hardened. There's no more time. They know you're here. Another clang, closer. Exit route? I asked. She nodded toward a trapdoor beneath the desk. East Wing Tunnel, leads to the cliffs. You'll have 30 minutes before they lock the estate. And you? She held up a thin volume bound in red twine. I'm not leaving. This is everything. The real archive, take it. Finish it. But go. I took the book, slid it into my coat, then turned to Eliza, who stood frozen in the doorway. Eliza, I'm coming, she whispered. But only if we come back for her. We will. She looked at my mother one last time. Then we ran. Chapter 9. The trapdoor led into a narrow stone chute that angled downwards so sharply I had to brace my boots against the walls to slow the descent. Eliza followed close behind, her breath quick and shallow, the red-twined archive book pressed tightly to her chest. Above us, the estate boomed with movement, fast, coordinated, merciless. They'd discovered the breach. And they were coming. The chute emptied into a low tunnel. Damp air brushed my face, carrying the scent of sea salt and earth, a sign we were near the cliffs. Which way? Eliza whispered. Follow the draft, I said. Air always finds the exit. She nodded and we ran. The lantern flickered as we moved deeper. The tunnel widened, rough walls softening into carved stone. It wasn't a servant's path anymore. This section had been built for extraction, or escape, or entrapment. The ground shuddered above us. A door slammed. Voices echoed, faint, but getting closer. I pushed us faster. We turned a corner and froze. Ahead, where the tunnel widened into a chamber, stood a girl. Not much older than us, black boots, grey coat, hair braided into a tight rope down her back. Same height as Eliza, same posture, same stillness. And when she lifted her chin, her eyes were not confused or frightened. They were trained, measured, void. Eliza's whisper cracked in the air. Echo, the real one, the final product, the replacement. Echo tilted her head, studying us like creatures behind glass. Her gaze flicked from me to Eliza, then to the archive beneath her arm. When she spoke, her voice was soft and precise, like something finely crafted. Enola Holmes, she said, and subject Echo 01, you are not authorized to leave. Eliza stepped forward. I'm not subject anything. Echo blinked once, incorrect. Her hand moved in a blur. A small blade flicked from her sleeve. Catching the low lantern light as it flew, I shoved Eliza aside. The blade sliced the air where her throat had been seconds before, embedding itself in the stone wall with a metallic thud. Echo didn't flinch. That was a warning. Funny, I said breathlessly. It felt like an execution. My orders are clear, she continued, voice unchanging. Retrieve the archive. Terminate the liabilities. Liabilities. Us. Eliza trembled, not with fear but with memory. Years of conditioning pulsed through her like an echo of its own. I saw it in the way her fingers twitched, how her breathing hitched. I grabbed her wrist. Stay with me, I whispered. I'm trying. Echo advanced, slow, controlled, deadly. I was told you might resist, she murmured. But I also know your weaknesses. Both of you. Do tell, I said, stepping between her and Eliza. Enola Holmes, Echo said evenly. Your weakness is your emotional attachment. You would sacrifice any objective to save someone you care about. She wasn't wrong. Her gaze shifted to Eliza. And you, Echo 01, your weakness is identity. You cling to fragments of yourself that no longer apply. You think they matter. They do not. Eliza flinched. Echo moved, fast. She lunged for the archive. I countered, swinging the lantern in a wide arc, not to strike, but to blind. Flame burst briefly in her line of sight. She recoiled. I grabbed Eliza's arm. Run! We darted into a side passage just as Echo recovered. Footsteps thundered behind us, hers, light and deliberate, not hurried. She didn't rush. She didn't need to, because she knew the tunnels better than we did. The passage narrowed. Cold air brushed my cheeks. The sea. We were close. Another turn, then another. We skidded to a stop at a split in the tunnel, two identical paths, left or right. I hesitated, and in that heartbeat of indecision, Echo's voice floated toward us, calm and close. Left leads to a dead end. Right leads to me. Eliza and I looked at each other. She's trying to trick us, I said, or trap us. Echo's voice again, echoing softly. I'm not tricking you. I don't need to. Something shifted in Eliza's expression then. Something old and sharpened by years of training. She'll expect us to choose the opposite of what she says, Eliza whispered. But she also knows we know that. So we choose. Neither. She pointed upward. A ventilation shaft, narrow, rusted, nearly invisible, but just big enough. Go, she said. I cupped my hands. She climbed, pulling herself inside with painful effort. I followed, scraping my elbows on the metal, pulling the grate closed beneath us. Seconds later, Echo entered the junction below, silent, searching, listening. Her footsteps were so light they barely disturbed the dust. She stopped directly beneath our shaft, tilted her head. Her voice floated upward. You won't escape. I was made to follow your patterns, to correct your errors, to replace you. Her hand touched the shaft's frame. Metal rang under her fingers. She was listening for our breaths. Eliza's chest heaved silently. My lungs burned. We stayed motionless. Echo lingered. Seconds stretched. Then, footsteps receded, faint, measured, gone. I exhaled shakily. We don't have long. Less, Eliza whispered. She won't give up. We crawled through the shaft. The metal groaned beneath us, rust flaking under our palms. Ahead, pale light filtered through another grate. We pushed it open and emerged onto the cliffs. Cold wind slapped my face, carrying the roar of waves crashing against jagged rock far below. Freedom, at least for now. There, Eliza said, pointing to a narrow path zigzagging down the cliffside. It leads to the shore. And from the shore, I said, to the village May marked. It was faint, but visible. A cluster of lights far below, where fishermen rose before dawn. Our way out. But then, a shadow detached itself from the cliff wall ahead. Echo, already there. She stood between us and the escape path, hair whipping in the wind, coat snapping like a banner. You survived the tunnels, she said. Not surprising. But this ends here. Eliza stepped forward, clutching the archive book to her chest. No, she said quietly. It ends with the truth. The wind howled. The sea raged. The cliff trembled beneath us. Echo stared at her. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. Then show me. Chapter 10. She stood between us and freedom, calm, composed, unmoving. A girl built like a myth, precise as machinery. Echo, the living ghost of Eliza's stolen name. The wind beat against the cliffs, dragging our coats sideways, flinging sea spray into our faces. Behind us, the tunnel mouth gaped like a warning. Before us, the path snaked down to the village lights far below, and Echo, impossible Echo, waited to end us both. You're done running, she said. voice sharp but still disturbingly gentle. "Then you're done following," I replied. She tilted her head. "This isn't personal, Enola Holmes. It's protocol." Eliza stepped forward, hands clenched at her sides. "You know what they made you, don't you?" Echo blinked. "I know what I am." "No, you don't. You think they gave you a name, a purpose, a mission. But it was mine. My name. My body. My failures. My memories. They scraped me clean and fed you the pieces." Echo's voice didn't change. "I was perfected from your design." "Then why are you here?" I demanded. "If you're perfect, why are they still chasing shadows?" That made her pause. Just slightly. The smallest crack in a wall of certainty. I took a step forward. "They didn't send you to eliminate us. They sent you to compare, to see if your loyalty was stronger than memory. They don't trust you yet." "I have no memory." "Exactly," I said. "And that's the problem. They built a blade, but they don't know where it will cut. You're not their weapon. You're their test subject." Her fingers twitched. Not toward a weapon, toward her own temple, as if something was itching there, a splinter in her thoughts. Eliza saw it too. "You hear it, don't you?" she said. "That little voice, buried deep, the part of me that was left behind when they rewrote you." "I don't hear voices." "But you feel them," I added. "You feel us. That's why you didn't kill me in the tunnels. That's why you're standing here talking when your orders were to retrieve the archive and terminate the threats." Echo was silent. The wind howled. Far below, the sea raged like it too had secrets. Then very softly, Echo said, "I hesitated." "What?" "In the archive room, when I first saw you. I hesitated. I should have attacked immediately." I nodded. "Because some part of you knew?" She looked at Eliza. "I don't know what to do with that." "Neither did I," Eliza whispered. Then, "Until I chose not to be what they told me I was." Echo stepped back. Just one pace. But enough. Enough to open the path behind her. And I almost believed it. Almost. Until she said too quietly, "But I still can't let you leave with the book." I tensed. So did Eliza. "Why?" I asked. "Because if I fail my mission, they'll send someone worse. And next time, they won't hesitate. Next time, they won't be me." Her hand moved. Blade. This time, aimed at the archive. I reacted on instinct, my boot kicking the loose gravel at her feet as I threw my body sideways, knocking Eliza down just as the blade flew. It sliced through the red twine, severing it. The archive spilled open, pages scattered across the cliff path, names, diagrams, ciphers, orders. Echo froze, dozens of lives exposed in a single gust of wind. Eliza lunged, grabbing one page just before it blew over the edge. "Stop," she shouted, holding it up. Echo paused mid-step. "This page," Eliza said breathlessly. "This is you." She turned it toward Echo. "See? Code name, Echo 2. Subject origin, Hemlock prototype. Alteration timestamp July 18th. That's the day they wiped me." Echo's eyes locked onto the page. Something rippled across her face. Not emotion, yet, but doubt. "Your memory isn't missing," Eliza said. "It's just buried. They didn't create you. They just carved me down until I fit their mold." Echo lowered her arm. I stepped in, slowly gathering the scattered pages, before the wind could claim them. "She's not a threat," I said carefully. "She's a victim, just like you were, Eliza." Eliza nodded. "And if we don't break the cycle, she'll become what they made me." The wind stilled. Echo took one long breath. Then quietly, "They're watching through me." "What?" I said. "My orders were uploaded before I left. There's a visual feed built into my gear, hidden in the lapel pin. Transmits everything back to Central." My stomach turned. "You mean they've seen this whole conversation?" She nodded once. "And they'll be sending a cleanup team." "When?" "Soon." Eliza's voice was calm. Then we stopped running. I looked at her, at Echo, at the archive, half shredded but salvageable, and made a decision. We didn't run down the path. We climbed up, back toward the estate, back toward the tunnels, back to the garden that had tried to bury us all. They'll come looking for us in the village, I said. But if we vanish into the estate's ruins again, we control the narrative, Eliza finished. They expect us to escape, I said. So we disappear in plain sight, let the garden swallow us, but on our terms. Echo nodded slowly. I can disable my feed, just long enough to mislead them. She reached up, unclipping the lapel pin. The light within flickered, then died. Are you sure about this? She asked. I turned to her. You were trained to correct flaws, weren't you? Yes. Then let's fix the whole system. By the time the cleanup team arrived, the cliffs were empty. The archive pages were gone. The lapel feed had cut out at the moment Echo terminated the threat. All that remained was a single red thread, tied to a piece of rusted iron, fluttering in the wind, a symbol of something they had long forgotten. Choice. Chapter 11. The garden didn't breathe. It listened. Every brick in the abandoned halls seemed to lean inward, every corridor curved like an ear. Even in disuse, even in so-called decay, the place had never stopped collecting whispers. Now we were planting the last one. Echo led us through a disused sub-level beneath the greenhouse ruins, guiding us with the precision of someone who had once been expected never to fail. Eliza followed close, one hand on the archive bag, the other holding a rusted tool that could serve as a weapon if it had to. I came last, my eyes scanning behind us, waiting for the trap we all knew would come. But for now, the path held. Where exactly are we going? I asked, voice hushed but sharp. To the control spine, Echo replied. It's beneath the central observatory tower. That's where they used to coordinate internal surveillance, sound, light, even the drug diffusers in the air vents. I blinked. Drug diffusers? They called it emotional calibration. Made girls easier to train, slowed resistance, increased compliance. Eliza's breath stilled beside me. I always thought that room made me feel smaller. It was designed to, Echo said. The corridors turned from stone to polished tile. The deeper we went, the more intact everything became. The garden's decay had been cosmetic, deliberate, to keep intruders believing it was dead. It was very much alive. We reached a sealed iron door, on its face a faded sigil, shaped like an Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. Echo placed her hand on the panel beside it. It should still recognize me. A moment passed, then a soft click. The door groaned open. Inside, the control spine stretched like a spinal column of gears and glass and brass dials. Instruments hummed. Somewhere, a fan turned gently. A room built to observe everything, but built so elegantly, so quietly, that it never announced its dominance. Eliza stepped in like she was entering the mouth of a memory. I used to come here, she said, for assessments. May would sit at that desk. Ask me what I'd done wrong that day, what I'd remembered. And what you'd forgotten, Echo added, always that. We got to work. Echo pulled the panel off the central console, exposing a tangle of wires and copper relays. If we input a full system recall and overload the memory cache, she said, it'll trigger the collapse protocol. What's that? I asked. The system assumes it's under full breach, so it purges every encrypted record to prevent leaks. You're saying we burn everything? Not everything, Eliza said, lifting the archive satchel. We've preserved the core. The truth goes with us. And what happens to the rest? Echo hesitated. It won't just delete files. It'll disable security walls, all the locked doors, all the cells. I looked at her. There are still people here? 3 girls, Echo said, on sedation, failed conversions. They were waiting to be recycled, that word again. I hated it. Then we free them too. Echo nodded once. But there's one problem, she added. Someone still has to authorize the purge manually, at the terminal, no remote access. Meaning someone would have to stay behind. I'll do it, Echo said. The words dropped like stones. No, Eliza said immediately. You got us this far. You've earned your way out. I'm not like you, Echo replied, with something almost human in her tone. I'm part of their system. Even if I break from it, I'm still built by it. My existence is a doorway they'll always try to reopen. Eliza's fist clenched. You're still you. Maybe, Echo whispered, but me is dangerous. I stared at her, then said, what if we lie? She blinked. We give them what they think they want. A final feed from your lapel camera, one last message, one last moment. We record the purge. You walk away while they think you're gone. But the purge won't complete if I leave. Then we trick it, I said. Delay the physical trigger with a timing mechanism. You activate it, then leave. We all get out. Together. Echo looked at the console, at the rusted mechanism, then at me. You think like her, she said. Who? I asked. Your mother. We rewired the trigger in silence. It took 23 minutes, 4 copper shunts and 1 old coin melted into a delay latch. When we were done, we had exactly 78 seconds between activation and full system collapse, long enough to escape if we didn't trip, short enough that no one else could override it. Eliza released the 3 remaining girls, silent, dazed, but alive. They didn't ask questions. Maybe they didn't need to. We returned to the observatory just before dawn. From its cracked window, you could see the cliffs, the path, and beyond that, the long road out. Echo placed the lapel pin on the terminal. Start the camera, she said. I nodded. It whirred softly to life. She turned to it, and for the first time her voice shook. This is Echo, Unit 2. Final report. The garden has failed. Not because its subjects disobeyed, but because they remembered. We were made to forget, but we chose otherwise. And you, who watch through the walls, you cannot erase what survives outside your reach. She pressed the switch. The terminal lit red. 78 seconds. We ran. The halls groaned behind us. Lights flickered and failed. Somewhere, alarms screamed. Somewhere, locks burst open. Somewhere, silence reclaimed what was stolen. We reached the outer stairwell. Echo hesitated, then followed. We burst out into the morning light, 5 girls fleeing a place that had called itself salvation. Smoke began to rise behind us. The garden was burning, and not one of us looked back. At the cliff's edge, Nicolette waited with a stolen cart and a shotgun across her knees. Well, she said, eyeing Echo, you made a friend. Several, I replied. She handed me the reins. You drive. I'm terrible with horses. As we rolled away, the sun cut across the sky like a new beginning. Beside me, Eliza clutched the archive. Echo sat quietly, wind in her hair, the sea far behind. Do you think they'll come after us? She asked. I glanced at her. No, I said. Why? Because they'll be too busy trying to erase themselves. Chapter 12. A week later, London was colder. Or perhaps I was only now able to feel it. We returned by fragments, no direct routes, no signatures, no names. Nicolette disappeared before we crossed the Scottish border, muttering something about owing herself a quiet life and a louder dog. The others we hid. Eliza's 3 half-recovered sisters from the garden. Their eyes still fluttered at loud sounds, and none of them had spoken more than a handful of words. But they were alive, and more importantly, they were free. Echo didn't ask what would happen next, not until we were back in Bloomsbury, in the coal cellar beneath Wisteria House, the archive laid out across the floor like a constellation of broken truths. Do you think they'll rebuild? She asked. Yes, I said. Eventually. Somewhere new. Under a new name. Then why does it feel like we've won? Because this time, I said, we get to choose who knows. We'd spent the last 3 days copying the files by hand, encrypting names, redacting locations, embedding false leads to prevent immediate retaliation. The original archive would be split and hidden across 4 countries. One would go to May Langford, I didn't trust her. But she had reach. One copy would go to the Home Office. Anonymously. They'd deny it. And then panic. The third would be buried in the foundations of a decommissioned girls' school just outside of Dover. No one would find it unless they knew where to dig. And the final copy. I slid the thin envelope into the spine of a book titled A Gentlewoman's Guide to Espionage and shelved it in the third row of my secret library next to Poisonous Herbs of England. Sometimes hiding things in plain sight is the boldest form of rebellion. Eliza had changed. She no longer started at door hinges or flinched when bells rang. But more than that, she stood straighter now, as if reclaiming her posture was the first step toward reclaiming her soul. She carried no name but her own. She chose it every morning. And that mattered. As for Echo, she remained in London. She never used a surname. We gave her a room in the boarding house, paid for in part by the mysterious donation from an unnamed aunt in Scotland. She took to chess. Badly. She rarely laughed, but when she did, it startled everyone in the best way. Sometimes she stood by the window with her hands behind her back, watching the fog roll in across the rooftops. And when I asked her what she was thinking, she only said, "I'm learning who I am, now that no one is watching." My mother didn't return to us. Not yet. She vanished in the final moments of the purge, left through a tunnel even Echo hadn't known existed. But we found a note tucked into one of the pages of the archive, written in the same steady script that had once taught me how to read ciphers using dandelion stems and firelight. Enola, if you're reading this, then you already know what to do. I was never trying to save the world. Only a piece of it. I chose to disappear because I had to. But you, my darling, you get to stay. Choose well. Love louder. And if they ever try to silence you again, set the whole house on fire. E.H., I cried. Alone. For an hour. And then I lit a match and burned the note, because some things were never meant to be found again. The newspaper never reported on the garden. But I saw the changes. A sudden restructuring in the Office of Security. A retirement no one expected. A death that raised no suspicions, except in those who knew how such deaths were faked. There would be no monument, no trial, no justice anyone could point to. But justice, I've learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it's just a door that stays locked forever. On the 10th day, Eliza found me on the rooftop. "Are you going to write it down?" she asked. I was holding a blank page, the wind trying to pull it from my hands. "I'm not sure where to begin." She sat beside me. "Try the middle." I smiled. "What happens next?" Eliza looked out over the city, chin lifted to the sky. "We rebuild, in the quiet, with truth. One girl at a time. That night, I hosted our first gathering. 6 of us in the parlour. One girl taught us how to identify coded lock tumblers. Another, how to speak 5 languages in 2 minutes flat. Eliza explained how to spot sedatives in tea. Echo said nothing, but rearranged the chessboard mid-discussion. Checkmate in 5 moves. By candlelight, I began the record. Not of names, but of victories. Small ones, real ones. A list of people who had walked away from fire and learned how to breathe again. And at the top, in ink, I had ground myself from walnut skin and iron salt. I wrote, "We are not what they made us. We are what we choose to become." E.H., you asked me once how the story ends. It doesn't. Not really. Because some stories keep living in the girls who refuse to be erased. In the ones who hide their names in needles and books and broken clocks, in the ones who stitch their truths into ribbon seams, in the ones who choose themselves over and over and over again, and if they're lucky, they leave behind a thread for someone else to follow, like the letter that changed everything.